It was a quiet evening in Maple Ridge, Georgia. The streets bathed in the amber glow of the streetlights, and the air cool against the cobblestone sidewalks of the historic district. Frank Delaney stood alone outside Baldwin's Rare Books, a tailored beige suit resting comfortably on his broad shoulders, his salt and pepper hair cropped neat and close. His posture was calm, composed, a man accustomed to patience. He checked his watch and then the empty street, waiting for his assistant, Elijah, who was running late with the book Frank had planned to pick up that night. The town had quieted for the evening, the last of the storefronts shuttered, the occasional set of headlights passing by without much notice. Frank was in no hurry. After a long career spent as a judge and now the mayor of Maple Ridge, waiting came easy to him. But the instinct honed over years of navigating rooms where he wasn't welcome stirred something uneasy in his chest. Something about tonight felt off. He heard the footsteps before he saw the man, a deliberate, measured pace against the brick. Frank didn't turn immediately. He knew. He could feel the weight of the gaze before the first word came. "Hey!" The voice called out sharply. "What are you doing out here?" Frank turned slowly, his phone slipping back into the pocket of his jacket. A white police officer, early 40s, stocky build, approached from across the street, one hand resting close to his duty belt. There was no curiosity in his eyes, only suspicion. "Waiting for someone," Frank replied evenly. The officer stopped a few feet away, planting his boots wide, staring down Frank like he'd already decided the answer wasn't good enough. "This late?" "Outside a closed business. My assistant is supposed to be dropping off something for me." Plans changed. There was a pause, but the officer didn't relax. Instead, he stepped forward, tension radiating from his body. "You got ID on you?" Frank let out a slow breath through his nose. "I'm not doing anything wrong. There's no cause for that." The officer's brow tightened. "It's a simple question. You standing around like this in this part of town looks suspicious." Frank's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed level. "This part of town?" The officer didn't flinch. "You don't exactly blend in, sir. You sure you're not up to something?" There it was. The ugly, familiar edge. Not suspicion. Prejudice. Frank met the officer's gaze, steady, unyielding. "I'm not loitering. I'm standing here." "That's not a crime." "Not yet," the officer muttered, fingers tightening on his flashlight. Frank took a small step back to maintain space. "There's no need for this. I told you I am waiting for someone." "You keep saying that," the officer replied, voice dropping lower. "But I'm not seeing a ride, am I?" The air thickened between them. It wasn't about questions anymore. It was about control. "You're trying real hard to seem important," the officer sneered, eyeing Frank's suit. "All dressed up like that." Frank held his ground, though he could feel the heat building behind his eyes. "I've told you who I am and why I'm here. That should be enough." "It's not," the officer shot back. "Not for me." Frank saw the pride in his eyes, the unchecked arrogance of someone who knew he had the power to escalate and no fear of consequence. "Let me make something clear," the officer hissed, leaning in. "You don't decide when this conversation ends." "I do." "I'm not resisting," Frank replied, voice firm. "I'm standing on a public sidewalk. I've broken no law." "Then you won't mind showing me some ID." Frank stared at him, the space between them heavy with the weight of all the nights like this that had come before. "No," Frank said quietly. The officer's lip curled. "No? You have no cause. You're going on a bad feeling based on who you think I am." "I know what I see," the officer snapped back. "You're stalling. Hiding something. I've told you everything." "I'm not hiding anything." "You just don't want to listen." The officer's patience snapped. "You want to play games? Fine. Let's play." Without warning, he grabbed Frank's arm, yanking him forward. Pain shot through Frank's shoulder. "Don't touch me," Frank barked, pulling back. "You're resisting," the officer growled, twisting Frank's arm hard. "I said, don't touch me." Frank's voice rose not from defiance, but from the sharp jolt of pain and disbelief. The officer didn't hesitate. He shoved Frank against the brick wall of the bookstore, the rough surface scraping Frank's cheek as the cuffs clicked into place too tight. The officer's knee pinned the back of his legs, forcing him downward. "You're assaulting me," Frank gasped, struggling to stay composed as the pain in his wrists and jaw flared. "I've done nothing wrong." The officer leaned closer, his breath hot with anger. You think you're above the law? Not tonight. Then, without a flicker of remorse, the officer's fist shot out, slamming into the side of Frank's jaw. The world tilted, the ringing in his ears drowned out everything but the dull roar of fury and disbelief inside him. Frank didn't collapse, though his knees buckled. Blood mixed with saliva in his mouth. He steadied himself, still cuffed, one hand pinned awkwardly behind his back. You're going to regret this, he whispered. The officer sneered. Oh, I doubt that. People like you never learn. Frank's eyes narrowed at the line, those words slicing deeper than the punch. People like you. Spoken so easily, so cruelly, as though it were simple fact. The officer dragged Frank toward the curb. Get down, he ordered. Frank dropped to his knees slowly, breathing hard, his heart pounding but his gaze unbroken. Remember who's in charge, the officer taunted, towering above him. Frank looked up, calm beneath the fury, his voice steady despite the pain. Before you throw me in that car, he said slowly, why don't you check my ID? The officer paused, blinking. What? You heard me? Frank repeated, lifting his chin. Check my ID. Scoffing, the officer reached into Frank's jacket pocket, pulling out the wallet, flipping it open. The badge inside caught the streetlight, glinting unmistakably. The officer's expression shifted from arrogant certainty to pale, stumbling dread. That's right, Frank said. Frank Delaney, mayor of Maple Ridge. The officer's mouth opened, then snapped shut. His hands shook as he fumbled with the handcuff key. Sir, you didn't know. Of course you didn't, Frank cut in, eyes burning. You didn't care to know. You didn't ask. You assumed. The crowd that had gathered at a distance now stood frozen. Phones out, cameras rolling. The evidence of the night etched into digital permanence. The officer struggled with the cuffs, finally freeing Frank's wrists. But the sting of metal against skin didn't fade. The bruises wouldn't either. Frank rose slowly, dusting off his jacket, wincing at the pain in his jaw. He stared down the man who had laid hands on him so quickly, so cruelly. You just assaulted the mayor, Frank said quietly. In front of witnesses. The officer stammered again. Sir, please, I didn't mean. Frank raised a hand, silencing him with a single motion. Don't. Not now. Frank didn't need to yell. The shift in power had already happened. The damage was done. And the reckoning? That was just beginning. The mayor turned, each step deliberate, leaving behind the flashing lights and the officer frozen in his own mistake. Frank pulled out his phone, dialing Elijah. Meet me at City Hall, Frank said. We've got a problem. And I'm done waiting. The battle that was about to unfold would not just be about one bad cop. It would be about an entire system and whether anyone would finally hold it accountable.